Okay, hello everyone. I'm coming to you here to uh, have a video on my round one of the 2025 Chess.com Daily Chess Championship. So this is the third time that I'm playing in this event, and I'm looking to hopefully make it close to the end. So I'm Ral. I'm right now in my group. I'm in group 5, and it's a very big tournament with almost 25,000 players in it. So the format is 12 people in one group or 11 in some other groups, and only one person advances in each round. So it's a very difficult tournament. Right now, I'm locked to make it to the next round, but we might have second place joining me if they're able to win the remaining 3 games. So I just wanted to dive into a few of my games in this tournament, just show some learning moments. So the first game is showing the power of activity and also not to give up when you're down on time. So this is a game that I played against this user in the championship, and I was playing black. So the game started with e4 g6, and basically in this opening I'm not occupying the center right away, but I'm planning to use my pieces and eventually fight the center. But I'm giving white a chance to play in the center. So here after c3 I played e5, d4 takes, d5, e5, and we developed our pieces. And so over here I played bishop g4, and the idea is that I really want to gang up against this pawn on d4, which is a pawn that's on the dark squares. So if I can trade my light squared bishop for my opponent's knight, I'm trading a piece on my light squares for an opponent's piece that can defend the dark squares. So basically I'm helping my chances on the dark squares by trading off my light squared bishop. So normally you want to probably develop your knight to f6, but this pawn on e5 is blocking that, so one knight's going to develop to h6, and maybe I can play f6 and chip away at the center. Like for example, um, if I were to play over here and take, then I can develop my knight in, and if like they were to ignore, perhaps I could take this and then I could focus on this pawn in the future. Um, so knight h6, h3, and after here I show what my plan was, which is to take. So this h3 move was not strong because I kind of wanted to take the knight anyways, but my opponent forced me to make the decision, and now I'm having 2 pieces attacking this d4 pawn. So um, my opponent defended it. Um, I protected this pawn, and I'm going to get my queen out next. So here I'm having 3 pieces attacking this d4 square, so I'm developing my pieces, and my whole game strategy has been around attacking this d4 pawn. So it's very important to have a plan in chess. So my opponent had to put another defender on it, on the pawn, but now they're kind of being a little bit passive, so their pieces are kind of blocking themselves, and my opponent had to retreat. Meanwhile, um, yes, I could have even added another piece into the attack, but I found that maybe I could instead, because my opponent has used all their resources to defend this d4 pawn. Perhaps I could create another weakness, as well as remove my opponent's bishop pair advantage. So I traded my knight over here and played bishop h6. So now I'm staring at this pawn, and white has a new weakness, as well as also this b2 pawn could be weak in the future. Though right now, if I were to take it, my opponent could play um, rook b1, and perhaps they could get some attack on my pieces. So I still have to be a little bit careful about that. So after f takes e3, bishop h6, queen d2, my opponent defended both pawns in one move. Um, and I played this queen b4 move. And my idea is that if my opponent were to take my piece, once I take back, I'm threatening a knight fork, attacking the rook and the king. I'm also, once the queen took, the queen's no longer defending the e3 pawn. So, sorry. So after takes, I'm threatening a fork. I'm also threatening this e3 pawn, and I could possibly check the king and take this pawn. So that's why my opponent did not take, and instead um, they blocked with the knight. So the new weakness is e3 pawn, so I brought my knight, looking to attack the queen and also attack this e3 pawn. My opponent castled, allowing me to do this. I jump in with the knight, queen e2, I took the bishop, king h1, I took this pawn on d4, and that's when my opponent resigned. And so the second lesson we're going to take from this game is that you shouldn't give up too early. You should look for ways that you can attack your opponent and continue the game. So in this position, it's worth noting that my opponent has a rook, and they also have a bishop that's out. They also have a knight. Their queen is out. So their knight, their queen, their rook, their bishop could also make room for the rook. So they have a lot of pieces. And so one of the things that they could have done here is they could have played knight takes d5 or bishop takes d5. For example, if bishop takes d5, they're clearing the way for the rook. And also now, if I were to take back, the knight is getting in. And while and see in this position already, if I were to take back, white is already better here because white has black's king is out in the open. White also has an open file. The knight can come in and check. There's also a fork here, as well as the knight is obviously threatening my queen. So it's really an uncomfortable situation. And so after a move like this, as well as if I were to move the queen, for example, to a5, then the c4 knight is hanging as well. So it's a very difficult position. Actually, I'd be worse here if I took. So after bishop takes d5 in this game, I had seen that move, and I had planned to play the move knight takes b2, with the idea being that now I'm attacking this knight here. I'm also attacking the bishop as well. And the game could keep on going because I thought that maybe my opponent would have to give up one of their pieces. However, the computer says that after knight e4 the game is even because white just has a big attack. And if I were to take this pawn in the center, then after knight d6 check and king d7, we have rook takes f7. This other rook can come in on the attack. So black is actually losing in this position if they're not if they take the bishop. So because of white's active rook, knight, queen, black's king in the center, really white should not have given up, because in the line that I calculated, which isn't the best move, actually the computer finds this move knight e3, which forks the bishop and the rook. It's also the knight is protected by the bishop, and the game is really complex. But see, in the game I didn't see that, and I was planning to take on b2 with the knight, which after that the game is even with knight e4. So my opponent really should have not thought that after losing these two pawns that they're just lost, and they should have seen that my king is still in the center and they have a lot of active pieces. So you want to play on in situations like this. So that's that game. I'll show two others. So one of the other games I'm showing is my second game against the same opponent. And this one I'm not going to show the whole game. Just going to skip through the first moves. My opponent did drop a pawn in the opening, but the interesting part of this game is the end game, which has an instructive moment. And it's just, yeah, okay, so we get to move 23 over here, and okay, white is better, but almost winning, but white needs to win this game. So in the end game, one of the key principles is that white should activate their pieces. Sorry, they should activate their king. That's key. Well, they should also activate the pieces, but the king activity in the endgame is very important, because in the endgame there's less pieces on the board, which means that there's less threats to the king. And the king also has more squares that they can go through without being attacked by pieces, since there's so few of them. The king also is very good at like taking the opponent's pawns, because the king can move one square in any direction, so it's very like mobile. whereas like this bishop can only see pawns on its same color, and this knight, it could attack a lot of pawns as well, but the king has been very good in these types of positions. So I bring in the king. My opponent brought their knight back, which you probably shouldn't undevelop a piece unless you have a very good idea for it. And as you can see here, my opponent now starts pushing pawns. But when my opponent pushed this pawn to g5, um, they can never have a pawn protecting this f5 square. So that just brings weakness, and my king could come in and in the future start winning pawns. So that's what I do. Um, Again, this move f6 weakens this g6 square, so now my king has a clear path into the position. Um, and so I keep going. And if you notice in these last few moves, my opponent's king, they have not brought their king into the game. They should be bringing their king to the center to oppose my my king, but they didn't do that. So this game, I bring my king activity. My opponent now starts bringing their king, but at this point, it's a little bit late because I'm already going to start winning my opponent's pawns, and I'm up a pawn from the opening. So over here, I played a fork, won my opponent's pawn, won the bishop, brought my knight back, and once I played knight e4 check, my opponent resigned because I'm just going to be winning all of their pawns, thanks to my king's activity. So king's activity in the endgame is very important. And the last game I'm going to show you is one of my two games against this player, from Turkey, who had a very strong games, and I almost lost to him in this game. And based on the results that are going on in the tournament, if I had lost a game to him, and he won the rest of his games, he would have advanced over me. So this was like a critical game, and just gonna go through the game because it was quite an interesting game. So we played this opening called the Catalan, where white tries to have a very strong bishop on this diagonal, and they want to show that their light squared bishop is better than black's light squared bishop. So just going through some of the theory moves, we're developing our pieces. My opponent brings their knight to e4, and I played e3, they took, and my opponent has a pawn over here, but if they were to take the pawn on c4, this pawn could most likely be won back, and white just has more room on the queen side. And if you can imagine this knight moving maybe somewhere in the future, that kind of just helps white's objective. So black knew not to take, though it's not terrible to take that pawn, but black decided to reroute the knight. Over here, instead of bringing this a rook to c1, I brought the f rook to c1 instead, because I'm planning to play on the queen side in this opening. That's how my pieces are set up. So after c6, I took on d5, which was actually a mistake. I probably shouldn't have allowed the potential of the knight to get back into the game. And also, more important than the knight getting back into the game, black's bishop can come out now, whereas it was behind its pawns. But I was just trying to open the game to potentially get my bishop out and use the c-file, but this was a mistake. So now I play b4, and my idea is that I kind of want to just chop black's pawns here, and then I want to use the pawn on c6 as a weakness, and then I want to attack it with my rooks and my queen and all my pieces, win the pawn, and just play on the queen side. But when I play b4, this square on c4 becomes weak, so my opponent might potentially go to c5, d6, and c4. Or sorry, f5, d6, and c4. So after knight f5, I played knight e5 because I was looking to guard the c4 square, as well as open up my bishop, perhaps bring the knight back and play b5 and just go through with my plans. Played bishop f1. I'm just trying to stop the knight going on c4 because I don't want black to get a position where they put a knight and then blockade with the pawns. though they'd have to defend the c6 pawn from my knight. But in a position where they kicked my knight away and then brought the knight to the center, and then once I move my to c4, and once I move my queen out, then played b5, now it's going to be very difficult for me to ever play on the queen side. So for example, if say I did nothing and then they went here, c4 and b5, I thought a position like this would be very difficult for white to play, because the queens, it's hard to play on the queen side. Though in this particular position, the computer's shown that even a4 works because my opponent cannot play a6 and take like this, otherwise they lose their rook. So still chances for me, but that's kind of what I was worried about in the game. So, but once I move my my bishop back and my pieces are kind of focused on the queen side, my opponent plays h5, and they're hoping to start attacking me on the king side. So I played a5 just because I didn't want my opponent's pawn to go to a5 and maybe stay on h3 or just take or gain more space. But I don't know if h5 was great. But after bishop f5, I played bishop e2, attacking the pawn. They played f6. So my opponent is bringing their pieces forward, and I'm having to play defense, and now black is slightly better. g5, my opponent continues the attack. Now I play b5 because I'm still going to play on the queen side. My opponent takes and offered a bishop trade, and I knew that this seemed to be a mistake because my opponent's bishop was kind of like attacking me, and my bishop was not really like attacking my opponent or anything. So I thought that they should probably keep their pieces on the board for the attack. They could perhaps use the bishop, knight, and queen together to attack my king, but they allowed me to trade it off. Played king g2 and queen f5, and now my opponent is staring at this f2 pawn. You can imagine at some point they'll play g4, and if my knight moves away and my queen is not defending the f2 pawn, they're going to win that. They're going to win that f2 pawn with check and probably checkmate me. So my opponent is kind of constricting my queen, because my queen has to keep defending this f2 square. And if my knight were to move, in some cases my opponent could take on h4, and once I take back, bring the queen in further. So I'm kind of in a lot of difficulty, but I'm going to try to bring my pieces over to the queen side, over to the 7th rank, and hope maybe get both of my rooks on the 7th rank. So I doubled my rooks, but here my opponent's able to bring a rook as well because the rook and the queen protect it, and this game is even here. But here's where I made my big mistake. So I took, and then I took on g5, and this was a bad idea because I missed the. So what I was thinking was I didn't want to take over here, because so I thought that after f takes g5, I'm fine with a move like. I'm fine with the move, for example, like queen a5, because if my opponent goes to c2 trying to attack my f2 pawn and checkmate me, I probably have some perpetual with queen d8, as well as I could potentially bring my knight in and stuff as well. But I was worried about after h takes g5 that my opponent's going to play this queen c2 move, and this idea is that kind of freezes my queen. As well as it attacks my a2 pawn, and I thought that after a move like a3 and then f takes g5, I don't really have any like useful moves. My opponent, because I have to keep defending this pawn, and if I try to like bring my knight and block my opponent's attack of this pawn, my opponent can like first of all, they can win this pawn and then try to promote their own. They could also just keep pushing these pawns at some point. And also, if I were to play my knight to e2 and move my queen out of the way, my knight's hanging. So I really have my pieces can't do anything, and my opponent's going to be promoting these two pawns, or like trying to promote something and win my pawn. So I thought that, yeah, but even in this position, the computer says that after I take on f6, white should be fine. uh, probably because the knight can get out, and then the queen can come in and deliver some perpetual or even have checkmate threats. So there's always uh, some sort of like counter attack, for example, maybe knight e5 over here. But this position is certainly very complicated. And after queen c2, f7, king g7, g4. For example, knight d2. And yeah, the game gets kind of complex. Here, maybe I even bring the king out and I can start avoiding some of the danger, but it is really a difficult position. But anyways, the move that I overlooked is that after h takes g5, when rook takes, queen takes. So my idea was that now when the pawn takes back on g5, I always have queen c6, and I can try to go for perpetual. But I missed the move here. I missed this move h4, and this move h4 is such a good move because what it does is basically I can't. Well, if I take with the knight, I'm getting checkmated, and this was the checkmate that I had to be careful of at all points, which is why I couldn't really move my queen. But if I take with the pawn, I'm also um, funny that computer says this is a draw, but I thought I was losing because my opponent could take on f3. But I think I do have some perpetual check in this position. Yeah. Yeah, there would be a perpetual check here. Um, like this. And my opponent really can't make any progress. So I didn't see that. I thought I was just losing the knight, but the way I played the position was I ended up losing the knight anyway. So after h4, I brought my queen to c6 because I thought I was just going to go for a perpetual check. And after h3 check, king h2, and queen takes f3, I thought I have a perpetual check here. After queen takes d5, um, I played a few checks, and I thought that if so, my opponent's king is just being checked right now, and the way they can either try to move the king out of the way and escape, or they can try to block so with the piece. So their knight and their queen are kind of a little bit far away. So if I keep giving like diagonal checks, they can't block it. And I thought that the king can never get out because I can always check on d6, and because my pawn attacks e5, the opponent's king cannot get out of this. But my opponent found a clever way to escape, which I saw. I was hoping they wouldn't see it, but they did. So after we play a couple of checks, the idea is, so I have to keep checking my opponent, and they go to this g4 square. So first they go to h5 and then g4. And the idea is that now if I were to check on this diagonal, my opponent can even play like f5, and then if I were to check again, they could block with the knight. The other thing is that it looks like I can just take on h3, which I don't want to do because after king g5 and then king g6, I don't have another check, and I'm just going to lose because my opponent is attacking this pawn twice. They have lots of checkmating threats, and they're up a knight over here. So I thought in this position I still have a draw with queen h4 check, but after king f5, I'm not in time to check my opponent along this diagonal. So my opponent is able to get out. And so we played a few more checks. And actually, after queen g8 check, I offered my opponent a draw, and they accepted the draw, which is interesting here because my opponent is actually winning, but it's very difficult to see how they would escape. But I think they should have played on because they have no chance of losing. But luckily, just barely got this draw, and this is going to ensure my advancing to the next round. But yeah, my opponent could have played and probably won this game if they were able to escape. And it's very difficult because I couldn't see where the escape was, but I thought that they might have some escape. So it's like important not to check the opponent on e6 because the knight will block. But if I keep checking from behind over here, they can't block the checks. So just trying to see because my opponent where they can escape, but it seems that the computer line over here will show it. So here, if we just click if you just click, oh, it should work. Yeah, there. If you click the move, it will just show the whole computer line. So, but yeah, the computer shows that the king will eventually escape. But there's a whole long process of checks. And yeah, my opponent finally hides their king on f2, brings the queen to e2, and um, and yeah, this is just a winning endgame for black. Black is up a knight, and they're about to start being up pawns as well. Um, so yeah, this was a really scary game because I almost lost. And this could have knocked me out of the tournament because my opponent, if they win the rest of their games, they would be on the same points as me because we also had a draw in the other game. But it turned out that my opponent accepted my draw offer here, or not here, but they accepted. Uh, hmm, yeah, they accepted anyways. They accepted my draw offer, and because of that, you can see in this results, I had two draws against them, and I won. I beat everyone else. They still have a few games going. If they win those games, then they will tie me in advance as well to the next round. So this was like probably my most crucial game of the tournament. But yeah, it's been a fun tournament so far, and um, I wish everyone who advanced to round two good luck. And yeah, I just wanted to share my analysis of the first round. Yeah, that's all I have. Take care.